So, for the past week here on the podcast, I've been moving through the company bit by bit to discuss the D23 announcements and explain what they mean for the future of Disney. There's been a lot to unpack and explore. Last week we did an episode on Animal Kingdom, then an episode on the Magic Kingdom, then Hollywood Studios, and before that, we took a look at the company as a whole to discuss how waning investor confidence would place pressure on different aspects of the entire Disney organization. Today we have an episode on what's coming to EPCOT. Since 2019, EPCOT is the park which has had the most work done on it. A complete redo of Future World, along with Moana's Journey of Water, Ratatouille, and not one, but surprisingly, 2 nighttime shows on the lagoon. So for D23, EPCOT was the park with the fewest announcements. The other 3 parks received at least one new deeply themed area each. The announcements for EPCOT are smaller, so on this episode, I will also discuss some of the non-EPCOT announcements for the Disney World Resort as a whole. But even in this, we have a lot of things to explore, including one significant project that is now almost certainly happening, but wasn't discussed at all at the D23 event. So once more, if you're ready, let's go. Let's start here with some notable possible projects that were not mentioned at all. No mention of an update to Journey into Imagination, even though that attraction is long overdue for an upgrade. Even on busy days now, the attraction has only a 5-minute wait. Nothing new for Figment, also no announcement of an inside-out retheme for that pavilion. Also, no mention of the Play Pavilion or any other plans for the old Wonders of Life Pavilion. The last piece of news for the Play Pavilion came out from Orlando reporter Scott Gustin, who back on January 13, 2023 said, Walt Disney World is reevaluating the original concept that was planned and announced for the Play Pavilion at EPCOT. I would expect more to be shared at a later date. So right now at least, there's no movement in the World Discovery side of EPCOT. And over at the front of EPCOT, back in 2019, Disney announced a retheme and rehab for Spaceship Earth that was abandoned during COVID. The 2019 retheme was to be called Spaceship Earth, Our Shared Story, which would focus on the history of human storytelling. The ride system in Spaceship Earth and the air conditioning system inside the building definitely need some work. I've been on that ride a number of times recently when it came to a quick e-stop, with everyone walking down and out of the big globe. But there was no announcement at D23 for plans to retheme this ride. Narration there by Judi Dench is likely to be with us for a few more years. Along with this, there were no announcements to include any other Disney IP into existing World Showcase pavilions, so the Mary Poppins proposal is now far, far back in the rearview mirror. And also, there were no announcements for a new World Showcase pavilion, but as we talked about last week, there's a chance that Disney may save any announcement of a South American pavilion, specifically a Brazil pavilion, for the D23 event in Sao Paulo this November. I would also expect to see more artwork for the Tropical Americas area at Animal Kingdom at that event, which includes an Encanto village with that film taking place in Colombia, and the Indiana Jones area, which is set somewhere, though I'm not exactly sure where, in Central America. Now let's kick into what was actually discussed and how it will change this park. Disney announced the new lounge, or rather that one of the previous lounges for corporate sponsors would be remade into a public space. The original show buildings in Future World were somewhat inspired by pavilions arranged for the World's Fair, which typically had corporate lounges where executives could entertain guests and talk business. When EPCOT opened back in 1982, each of the Future World pavilions had a sponsor and a corporate lounge. Most, though not all, of these corporate lounges were on an upper floor and looked out over the park. The lounges are still there, though not all are used as corporate spaces anymore. In the test track building, there's still a very large lounge for GM employees. But the lounge over in the Seas Pavilion, which hasn't had a sponsor in many years, was long ago shifted over as a space for private events. That lounge there doesn't look over the park, but instead has a lovely view into the tank. It's not far from the Coral Reef restaurant. At the D23 event, it was announced that the corporate lounge at the back of Spaceship Earth will be moved over to a public space. And the announcement suggests that Disney has sort of given up finding a new sponsor for Spaceship Earth. Sponsors in 2024 typically want a whole lot more for sponsoring an attraction than they did back when the park first opened in 1982. GM, for example, over at Test Track, is able to display a range of their cars, and perhaps here over at Spaceship Earth, there's just not space or interest for a similar type of corporate display. The lounge, as I mentioned, is on the backside of Spaceship Earth. It's almost directly above the Dreamer's Point statue of Walt Disney. Just look above Walt's head for that long line of windows. It's there. I've been up there a handful of times, though I haven't been up there since shortly before the pandemic, and I've never been up there at night. The windows present a sweeping view of the World Celebration area leading out toward World Showcase Lagoon. Again, I've never been up there at night, but I am guessing that these windows are going to offer some pretty spectacular views of Luminous. I'm guessing that Disney will offer regular dining reservations for most, if not the entire day, like they do over for the lounge at Space 220. But I am wondering if Disney might offer a special package for Luminous viewing there at night. I don't know the actual capacity of the lounge, but from being up there, I would guess it's somewhere around 150 people. Regardless, during the day or night, it will be a nice place to decompress away from the crowds. Not far away in the World Discovery area, we have the space for our next announcement. Test Track closed at the beginning of summer for its third full retheme of the attraction. On our video updates over on YouTube, we've shown that the front doors are still open with crews taking up material from public areas. One can assume that the show sets are being moved out the back doors as well, with a good deal of demo happening inside the building. There's a whole staging area on the asphalt inside of that big outdoor circle that the cars speed around at the end of the ride. There have been multiple permits with companies that tend to install new sets, and also one with Spitz Incorporated, which has installed materials for projection domes in other Disney attractions, including the queue area of Cosmic Rewind, the place where, like a planetarium, you can see on the screen above you images of stars and galaxies far away. So my guess is that there should be some sort of overhead projection element in the queue or in the ride area. Maybe a ride through the great outdoors under the stars, or maybe it's another type of projection entirely to enhance the simulated areas of nature that will be in the ride. The one piece of concept art we have for interior stage areas shows either a rising or setting sun behind trees, with that sun being very bright. So maybe large projections are ways to realize that image. But again, both of these ideas are only guesses. The new Test Track show has been described as a tribute of sorts to the original World of Motion attraction. That was the attraction partially designed by legendary Disney animator Ward Kimball that once occupied this spot when EPCOT Center first opened. The revamped ride will focus on new technology and cars, and also somehow explore the past, present, and future of automobiles. I've been told that the song from the original World of Motion Pavilion, that is, It's Fun to Be Free, will somehow be used inside the attraction, but this maybe doesn't mean that the original song plays. In the most recent version of Test Track, as cars jutted out onto that outdoor raceway, there was a sign that said, FN2BFRE, which was a sly way of keeping Fun to Be Free in the last version of the ride. But here's hoping that there's something more in the new version. Sets in the second half of the ride will feature a journey through the outdoors, while the area in the standby queue will feature developments that have transformed the automobile. The one piece of concept art we got for the interior a long time ago was of a test track car moving through nature. I assume we'll have a number of natural environments. The two sections that I wish they'd change about the course layout are the brake test area and that jerky maneuver around the big rig, but I doubt that's actually going to happen. I'm pretty sure that both the first and second versions of Test Track have the exact same ride programming. That is, the cars go along the road at the same speeds, pause in the same places, brake in the same places, and so on. Back in the late 1990s, it took a really long time to get a version of this programming that worked with the cars and the track. So again, just as a guess, I assume that the course will be the same, as will the programming that guides the cars over it. Much like how the water flow and the flume course is identical between Splash Mountain and Tiana's Bayou Adventure. Again, in terms of a journey through various lovely environments, I think Test Track would be a stronger experience if you could change some of the ride course, but that's probably both difficult and expensive. So we'll probably get some lovely new sets, new music, new lighting, and almost surely a new pre-show, because anything beyond that I think would take more than a year to accomplish. At the D23 event, we didn't get a whole lot of new information about Test Track, and certainly no new art. But we were told that this attraction would reopen in 2025. The length of various permits presently existing suggests that this may open mid-2025, though of course permits can always be extended. But of those attractions announced for 2025, I think this might have the greatest chance of opening before next summer. And those were the only two announcements for EPCOT, so let's shift over to the resort in general. Beyond EPCOT, in terms of entertainment for the resort, I would expect Disney to announce a number of entertainment offerings for Florida for the summer of 2025 and also for 2026. We've talked about this before, but thanks to some poor planning under ex-CEO Bob Chapek's reign, Disney now finds itself in a position where Universal is opening a very impressive and very expensive theme park across town in 2025, with Disney unable to open any brand new attractions of size or scale during the same period. This means that Disney will pivot to live entertainment to freshen up its parks until the next project of scale can open. And that, rather sadly, isn't until 2027, when the Tropical America's Pueblo Esperanza project opens over at Animal Kingdom. This means that Disney has 2 years to frontline entertainment. The first of the large entertainment announcements was made at D23. It's for the Magic Kingdom, a new nighttime parade, a descendant of the Main Street Electrical Parade, but from the concept art it looks far more like the lovely nighttime parades they offer over at the Disney parks in Tokyo. The art for this forthcoming parade was pretty sparse, but what was there showcased illuminated floats that featured characters from Pinocchio, Peter Pan, Encanto, and Frozen. No doubt there's gotta be more. If you don't count the nighttime holiday parades for Halloween and Christmas, the Magic Kingdom hasn't had a traditional nighttime parade since 2016, when the Main Street Electrical Parade departed Florida and returned briefly to California. The nighttime parades have a long history in the American and Tokyo parks, and to be honest, Main Street in both California and Florida has felt somewhat empty without one. At night, Main Street in the Magic Kingdom is simply a mass of people waiting for the fireworks. This parade is going to change that dynamic and give the park more of the vibrant feel it had a decade ago at night. This also suggests the Magic Kingdom should be open later, on nights without a special event right now, and it is summer season. The Magic Kingdom typically closes at 10 p.m., sometimes 11. But a nighttime parade should push this back some, which will be a nice change. A decade ago, during the summer months, the Magic Kingdom was often open till midnight, occasionally till 1 a.m. So with the premiere of this parade, I expect to see closing times closer to 11 p.m. or maybe midnight. As we move into 2025 and toward 2026, I would expect other entertainment offerings of size to be announced elsewhere at the resort. Over at EPCOT, Luminous is still fairly new, so that would be the last park where I would expect a large entertainment announcement. But I wouldn't be surprised if we saw something of size for either the Animal Kingdom or Hollywood Studios. I am a little surprised that there's been no attempt to arrange some nighttime offering for the 5,000-seat outdoor amphitheater around Discovery River Lagoon. At D23, outside of the official parks presentation at night, there was one other quiet announcement for the resort. It was over at the DVC booth on the convention floor. There they had new concept art for the Poly Tower that is now nearing completion on Seven Seas Lagoon. There was one piece of concept art that showed the splash pad, which will feature an oversized figure of Moana and her boat. There were also two images of the new restaurant. The restaurant, as you can now see, is decorated with wood carvings and sculptures of fish moving above the tables, much like the sculpture of birds arranged around the ceiling over at Jico at the Animal Kingdom Lodge. The restaurant appears to be on the ground floor, but there are wide windows that open to a panoramic view of Seven Seas Lagoon. The overall feel of the space is similar to the Polynesian offerings of Tambu Lounge over at the Great Ceremonial House, but with more light. This restaurant, from what I could see, seems like it will very much fit the vibe of the existing resort, even if other parts of the tower feel a little bit more generic. The second image of this restaurant was of its outdoor patio, which also faces the Seven Seas Lagoon. The outdoor seating area is beneath a long overhang, which extends far beyond the tables. I'm guessing that for an average late afternoon rainstorm, this would likely keep diners dry. And as long as we're talking about DVC, let's talk about one more thing that was not announced at the D23 event. And to be honest, it is no surprise that this was kept out of the announcements. Earlier this summer, there was a group of permit filings that suggested that work might resume for a DVC and hotel property between the Wilderness Lodge and Fort Wilderness, perhaps reviving the old Reflections project. For longtime Disney World fans, this is the land where River Country once stood. The first of these requests back in May of this year appears to be to extend an early permit that was arranged for the reflection structures that were originally intended to be built here. Years ago, Reflections was to be the Disney Lakeside Lodge, with about 900 cash hotel rooms and about 800 DVC villas and cabins. In a Walt Disney Imagineering letter to the South Florida Water Management District, Disney explained that, we would like to request an extension to this permit as construction is not yet complete. The project was shut down during COVID-19 conditions and therefore delayed the completion of the project. This might be somewhat of an understatement. The project progressed through the site preparation and very early construction phase before stopping during COVID, likely because Disney was looking at endless rows of empty hotel rooms during the pandemic. The original Reflections Resort was going to be tower lodges themed to the animated features that explore nature, such as Bambi. Even if Disney focuses again on this site, there is no guarantee that what they build now will be anything similar to the original Reflections concept. But if they do build here, which is starting to look likely, a large resort would have the potential to turn this side of Bay Lake into a resort district, somewhat like the resort cluster outside of EPCOT's International Gateway around Crescent Lake. In one very early version of plans for this area many years ago, there was even a lazy river next to the pool, which would have made the pool area as popular as Stormalong Bay. But who outside of Disney knows what's in the plans right now? But with a resort built here on the old Reflections construction pad, Bay Lake would then have a stretch of development with walking paths that connect up Wilderness Lodge, including Copper Creek and Boulder Ridge, down to the new cabin areas at Fort Wilderness, and this new resort, whatever it will be called, and then over to Pioneer Hall, the marina, the horse barn, and the pony rides. There used to be a path that connected Wilderness Lodge to Fort Wilderness, but that was closed to the public back when ground clearing began for the old Reflections project many years ago. It was also one of my favorite places to walk in the evening on property. The letter from WDI requests an extension of that permit for 5 years, that is, through 2029. Another permit requests that extension for a staging area moves through 2028. And of course, plans can change and be extended again. But those dates there give you a reasonable framework for what Disney might be thinking about if they move ahead with this. 2027 to 2030 or 2031 is that period when Disney World should open a number of new lands in its parks. 2027 is the year that they plan to open the Tropical Americas development over at Animal Kingdom, with an Indiana Jones area and an Encanto Village. That should drive a large number of visitors to the resort, particularly non-regular visitors. And in subsequent years, we should see the Cars area where Rivers of America now stands, and then the Villains Land at the back of the Magic Kingdom. Somewhere in there also, there should be a Monsters Incorporated mini-land at Hollywood Studios. A string of developments like this should make a group of visitors interested in coming to the resort year after year, or perhaps every other year, which is how DVC creates interest among potential buyers, by showing them all the reasons that they might have to return year after year. So it makes sense to me that Disney would pursue a new DVC project to open along with these new lands. My guess would be that the DVC project would open early in that phase, maybe 2027 or 2028. It also makes sense that Disney wants to extend the Magic Kingdom area resorts, as these remain extremely popular and have been the site of recent expansions, including those over at the Grand Floridian and the current expansion with the Polynesian Tower. The area around the old Reflections construction site remains fenced off. There's no official announcement, nor was there one at the expo. Disney might simply be trying to estimate how these new lands, now that they are announced, will change or increase visitation to the Disney Resort between 2027 and 2031 before announcing another large hotel expansion. But it's clear that with the flurry of permits, Disney is actively looking at this area, perhaps with the idea of moving some of the crews from the Poly Tower over to Fort Wilderness once the tower is done. But again, that of course is speculation. And remember, I mentioned that it wasn't surprising that this wasn't announced at D23, even if there are now firm plans in place, which is still a pretty big if. At the moment, Disney has a new DVC tower set to open this December at the Polynesian. No doubt, the Disney Vacation Development arm of the company would like to focus on promoting the Poly Tower without potential customers contemplating if they should buy at the Poly or perhaps wait to see what this new Wilderness Lodge is before deciding on their home resort. So even if work begins at the Fort Wilderness site later this year or early in 2025, I doubt we will see very much about this new development, assuming it moves forward, before Disney has sold a lot of DVC contracts over at the Poly. But this is another area at the Disney World Resort to watch as we move forward. I'll be back later this week to put up more episodes. Last week we put up a bunch of individual podcast episodes that explored area by area how the D23 announcements would reshape the Florida parks. This week we'll continue with that pattern by posting midweek episodes. The next area that we will explore are the California resort, and then after that the entertainment divisions, which include film, streaming, and TV. Again, I'm trying to do a couple of things here. I don't simply want to list off what was announced. I want to take us down a far more detailed and nuanced path, but I also want to get these discussions out there as quickly as possible. So I'm simply going to post podcast episodes and videos as quickly as I can this week and maybe even into next, because these topics will set the agenda for the company for the next 2 years and longer. I'm sure we will refer back to information in these updates for many years moving forward. Lastly, as you know, we're an ad-free, listener-supported podcast. We do just 2 things: deep dives on stories related to the history of the Disney studio and the parks, and news and analysis of current events as they relate to the Disney company. We are funded entirely by listener contributions, specifically by listeners who join us over on Bandcamp as monthly subscribers. On Bandcamp, you'll find well over 200 episodes not available on iTunes or anywhere else. But the best reason to join us there is to support the work we do here and to make sure that this podcast continues to exist. You can support us by becoming a monthly subscriber at dhipodcast.bandcamp.com. I'll also leave a link down in the show notes. So, until then, this is Todd James Pierce.